Welcome to the Security by Default podcast. I'm Joseph Carson, host of the show. In each episode, we make cybersecurity simple with amazing guests who share real-world experiences and insights. So let's get security by default. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Security by Default podcast. Host of the show here, Joe Carson, bringing you basically, different knowledge, experiences, insights, and the chaos world we live in, which is typically doom and gloom. But I'm hoping this episode today is going to basically lift us all up, entertain us, and bring back what used to be a fun industry. I remember the early years that sometimes I couldn't stop laughing throughout the day. It was so entertaining. But we have to think about, what makes us happy, what entertains us, what brings that laughter every day. And one person that does that for me is an awesome guest. And thank you, Ian. Welcome back to the podcast. This is the first time on this podcast. So Ian, want to give the audience a background about yourself, what you do, and did you choose the industry? Did it choose you? And a little bit about your origin story.
Sure, yeah, of course. Hiya, Joe. Thanks for having me back, man. You are a glutton for punishment. You didn't learn your lesson the first time, so
no, I did not.
It was your own fault, essentially. What's my origin story? So my origin story, right, is I didn't want to be in cyber. No one wakes up and goes, you know what I want to do? I want to be in cybersecurity. Because it wasn't even an industry when I left school. The internet wasn't about, mobile phones weren't about. I know there's people going, whoa, how did you survive? We got along just fine. Don't you worry about that. It was great not being in contact with people. You'd say to your mates, where are you going to be Friday at 7:30? Oh, we'll be in the Green Man pub. I'll see you then. Nothing. See you Friday at 7:30. That's how we rocked it up in the late 80s, early 90s. Anyway, so I wanted to be a footballer. Ooh. That was my dream. This is the shirt I wore at Wembley with the medal when I played at Wembley. That's a signed Jurgen Klopp shirt. That was my dream. Fortunately, I'm shit at football. So I was okay. I was better than average. I was better than 99% of the people. Just the 1% who make a career out of it, who make it to the very top. I wasn't as good as those guys. There was a guy at Liverpool when I was growing up in my position called Steve McManaman. Don't know whatever happened to him. He may have had a decent career. I don't really know. I hope he got on okay. I hope he did okay. So that kind of barred my way into my dream of playing for Liverpool. So that was my dream. But it was the late 80s. There was computers about. I had a ZX Spectrum, a Commodore 64. I started to learn basic programming. My dad, this is the way my dad thinks, right, or the way he used to think, is, listen, if you could program that computer, maybe you could program it to give us the results of the pools each week. The pools were our lottery back then. It would be all the football games. You'd say what the outcome of that was. And he thought if I could put enough data in that I could get from that computer the answer that would make us millionaires at the weekend. There's two problems with that. The ZX Spectrum wasn't designed for that stuff, nor was BASIC. And I'm shit at programming as well. So they were two kind of real limiting factors. But it got me interested in that side of things. My trade is a mechanic, believe it or not.
Really?
So it was late 80s. There was a lot of unemployment. I got an apprenticeship, which was very rare then, to become a mechanic. So it was great. Loved it. It was 4 years. It was an enjoyable time. It was great. I think it's what a lot of industries miss nowadays. Whether they're the old industrial stuff or the new IT industries, they miss that ability to take a kid from school or university and mold them into a grown-up. And that's the most important thing my apprenticeship gave me. It gave me the ability to speak to people on a peer relationship who were much older than I was. Whereas before that, everything was hierarchical. They were teachers, they were parents, I was down here, and it brought me up to that level. It brought me up to that level with respect as well. We'll possibly come onto it later on with social media and stuff like that, but I'm convinced that the current level of disagreement on social media and the way people speak to each other on social media is because people have forgotten how much it hurts to be punched in the face.
They hate that physical.
That's part of what my apprenticeship gave me. It gave me the respect. You'd speak to people they've earned their respect. They've done their time. They they've honed their craft, so they've got something to teach you. Now everybody's a smart ass. Everybody knows the answer from ChatGPT, and everybody thinks that their opinion is a fact. And most of them, their opinion counts for very little indeed, especially when it's backed with no experience. So at the end of my apprenticeship, I went to university and I studied electronic engineering because it was something I always wanted to do anyway. And I had two older cousins who were like older brothers to me, and they kind of got me into that. They worked at BT and one worked with lasers and stuff like that. So they got me into that. And then it just went from there. I joined the MOD, Ministry of Defence here in the UK. Ministry of Defence took me into the security world. It wasn't called cyber back then. There was no idea of cyber. When the internet first was coming in, early 90s, mid 90s, to cyber was a verb. To cyber meant to have online relations. Online sexual relations, in fact. It meant kind of webcamming. It was an early version of OnlyFans. So it makes me giggle now when people say I'm in cyber, because they're just admitting to being self-abusers online, essentially. That's what they're admitting to. So I'm old enough to remember those earlier days, right, And then from there, joined Symantec for a few years, 6 years, had a wonderful time, traveled the world, met wonderful people. And then went out working on my own, and for the past 18, 19 years, apart from a spell in Australia for a year, which was great, I've worked for myself as a contractor.
And so, from those early times, what's when you actually, we crossed paths at some point in Symantec as well. I think I joined a little bit later than you.
Yeah.
So before you moved into working for yourself, what was the experience like at, working for the MOD and the likes of Symantec? What did you learn from those types of organizations?
From the MOD, you get to work on wonderful machinery, right? I worked on the naval side of the MOD for a large chunk of that time, and being on submarines and stuff like that. I'm not giving anything away from the Official Secrets Act here or anything like that. It was just awe-inspiring and frightening in the same way. These are machines of safety and defense, but also death for somebody else potentially, right? So it's just it's a weird dichotomy, but just such wonderful, and also as well dockyards, kind of like mechanic upbringing in my apprenticeship. Dockyards, I fit right in a dockyard. That humour, that approach, that kind of saying things as they are, being able to express yourselves in ways that you probably wouldn't get away with now today. Somebody would be upset with you, So I felt comfortable in that environment, so it was good. Symantec, I think, so it was kind of a gradual thing from the MOD, from big machines into their cyber world, which was via communications and things like that. And then I did a small consultancy in London at the dot-com bubble, which I think I hold the record for spending the most time drunk during the dot-com bubble. I think it was about a year all told. And then at the end of that, I joined Symantec as their firewall expert. And I think what I got from Symantec, especially in the early days, was that family feel. It was a lovely, we'd just bought a company called Accent, which brought in the enterprise security product range on top of the AV that it was already known for. And it was just such a lovely camaraderie. There was like 8 or 9 of us as SEs, system sales engineers, technical bitches, for want of a better phrase. So we would be the salesperson's go-to to explain how things worked. But we just had a ball. We had a ball for the 4 or 5 years that we were together. It was just, we were kind of inseparable, and we went around the globe, and we'd had sales conferences in Vegas and Dallas.
I remember those conferences.
They were just the best thing ever. There was a paid holiday to, just and to go and meet people from the company around the globe as well. It was just a wonderful, wonderful time. And I think that's where I got from. Towards the end, when we merged with Veritas, it became a bit salesy and a bit more cutthroat and a bit more, we've got to sell at which obviously everybody does, but it got to a big serious organization, and I think I didn't like that. From my point of view, I didn't like it. So that's when I decided to go out working on my own. But I take everything from whether it's my working life, whether it's my private life, whether it's my sporting life, the good and the bad, you take stuff away from it, and you make it your own.
Absolutely. I think I mean, our journey has been a very similar one as well. And even my time at Symantec, I learned a lot. A lot of the enterprise, the processing, the techniques, working in latest technologies. And I completely agree. At some point in time, you do find that sometimes the organization shifts away from wanting to make the world a better place to being more about profitability. And there is that switch. And sometimes, for me, it has to be the balance. I like to have both. My goal is to make the world a safer place online for everyone. And when that, loses the priority, for me, it's always kind of, the motivation kind of switches as well. So what was it like switching to working for yourself? What was that like? What was the journey? And did you find that it was more about doing what you enjoyed doing, or was it learning other parts of the trade for running a business?
I think for me, as I get older, I become more outspoken. I don't become more outspoken. I become less tolerant of arseholes, right? I just become less tolerant of them because, I'm nearing the end of mine. I'm not nearing. Hopefully, I've got a good 40 or so years left. But, I'm in the departure lounge. I'm heading to departures, is what I'm saying. That's where I'm going. I'm not. It's not arrivals anymore. I've picked the bags up, and I'm heading to departures. Essentially, is where I'm going. So I generally, it's not that I'm not rude unless you're a heckler in the crowd, then I am. But it's just that if somebody's talking nonsense, I'm more apt to call them out on their nonsense now than probably I ever was. Whether that's in front of people, I don't want to intentionally embarrass people, but normally I try and do it privately and call people to one side and stuff like that. So that's what working for myself gives me, is that ability that, if people don't like me or like my approach, then they can end the contract, right? It's really that simple. Or I can end the contract, which I've done if I don't like them or their approach. So it's a double-edged sword. And it's just that freedom, really. I think the difficulty, if anybody's ever thinking of going contracting, it's become a lot more difficult here in the UK with IR35 and the different rules and the different taxations and stuff like that. But if anybody is thinking of going contracting, there's always that big leap of coming away from the security. But the thing you gain for the lack of that security is the control over your own destiny then, and it leads you into weird places, without leaving Symantec, I wouldn't have done the contracting. Without doing the contracting, I wouldn't have done my own business. Without doing my own business, I wouldn't have had the idea of the awareness videos. Without doing the awareness videos, I wouldn't have had the idea of doing stand-up comedy. It's something I've always wanted to do. Without doing stand-up comedy, I wouldn't have been able to perform with some of the greatest acts in this country on the comedy circuit and just fulfill a lifelong dream of doing it and the enjoyment that it gives me, which is better than any football game I've ever played, by the way. And I played in some big football games as well. So, yeah, stand-up gives me something that is difficult to find elsewhere.
So give the audience, I mean, that's I think one of the great things is that, to moving through that journey that you've had, what was the switch? I mean, you've been speaking in front of audiences and doing the cyber off videos, the awareness videos, which have been fantastic in entertainment, and really, it brings the creativity side. I think that's always, to be that creative is a skill and a value in itself. What was the switch to stand-up comedy? How was that? What was your first time like getting up in front of an audience and doing that?
I mean, nerve-wracking, everything you would imagine, nerve-wracking, sweaty, horrible, you don't want to do it, you do want to do it, and dry mouth and all that type of stuff. But I've never been one to shy away from that type of stuff. So, I've always done kind of presenting and keynote speaking. As my wife would say, you love the sound of your own voice, dickhead. And she's right. She's right, I do. But I think I've got something to say as well, so it's not just... But I was always that frustrated performer, I think. Later on in life, having had a couple of pints trying to stop me getting on the karaoke, it's a difficult thing to do, but it's that frustrated performer. But from a very early age, ever since I first saw Billy Connolly on TV, just, he turns up on Parkinson, he turns up in this brownie orangey leather suit, and he tells the most inappropriate joke for that time ever on live TV. I was 6 or 7 years of age. I didn't know what the joke meant. I can still remember it to this day. I didn't know what the joke meant, but he was funny. He just embodied funny. And from then I thought, wow, how good would that be to be able to capture an audience like that and hold them in the palm of your hand. And I went to see him years later, and he was brilliant and all that type of stuff. But I've followed him his whole career, really, and he's just been one of the heroes of mine. You know, you look at people who stand out in your life, not just in famous people, but private life and stuff like that. You know, and he's one of those that regularly comes to the fore, that you almost have a kind of kindred spirit with, you know, that the stuff he says, you go, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember my family being like that when he talks about family parties, or, you know, so there was just a lot of similarity between us. I thought at one point, and I did a comedy course. I did the comedy course to help me be better at keynote speaking. In terms of to make it more interesting, a bit more of a performance and less of somebody reading slides.
More of the storytelling aspect, which is what comedians are great at, is they're great at the transition.
Exactly.
I think that you're talking about Billy Connolly. He was the perfectionist in transition. He would lead off on one joke and then forget about exactly, you know, and then come back to the original joke he was telling. He was so good at bringing those back in. And ironically enough, that was actually one of my first books I ever read was Billy.
Right.
And when I was traveling, I went to Australia for a year, traveling around, and that was the one huge book, the hardback copy book that I took with me. And I always remember one funny part in it, where it was about when he was working on the oil rigs. And he said everyone was all excited to, you know, they had a weekend off coming up soon. They'd been on this oil rig for 6 weeks nonstop working, and they had all their money, and they wanted to, you know, they were going on shore to this topless pub. It was a topless bar that they were all going to, and they're all excited about this topless bar. And everyone gets onto the, you know, onto the land, and they all run to this topless bar. And when they get inside, they realize it's actually just a bar with no roof. You know, those types of things is like, you know, capturing you because he's leading you on. Even I took my father to see him live as well.
Nice.
And it was such a great night. We got to see him just beforehand riding up on his motorcycle when he was actually arriving. And it was for me, that's what I love. I love comedians. I love a specific type of comedy, and I love going to stand-up nights. It's what takes me away from the chaos work that we live in, that doom and gloom. And it's what just brings you and lightens you up and connects you with just your own personal experiences, but brings them to light in a funny way.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's lovely being on stage and being able to tell stories, because I do tell jokes, but I make the story funny by adding jokes into it and embellishing the story as well, you know. So I'll mix 2 or 3 scenarios together to come up with the thing that's still the essence of what I'm trying to say, but it might not have historically happened in that way, but it did happen, you know. So it's lovely to be able to do that. And also as well, from the early days of the videos that I used to do at Cyberoff, because I worked with Dan Kelso doing the Cyberoff videos. So if anybody knows Dan on LinkedIn, you know, he's a wonderful marketer. I would say 90% of the creativity of those that time came from them. And I added the 10% of not just my performance, but some of the ad-libs and stuff like that. And I think that's what helped my confidence in terms of being able to go, I quite enjoy this. It's uncomfortable. You know, some of it's uncomfortable, the dressing up bits.
I was going to comment, whose idea was it to dress up in some of those outfits? Was it your idea?
No, it was theirs. I would go in, we'd film like every week, right? And we'd go in and we'd do another one. We'd go, we've got this idea, you're up for it. And I never once said no. Never once said no. The only time I got close to saying no is we did the Spice Girls one. So we did the Spice Girls. And I'm sure they got me to dress up in hot pants as Victoria Beckham, right? As Posh Spice. They got me to dress up in that, and I was like, no, I'm not doing that. because they were proper. You could see my religion. They were proper hot pants, right? It's I'm atheist, by the way, for anybody who's offended by that. Go and fuck yourselves. So yeah, and I was like, no, I'm not doing it. And they had to talk me into that one. That was the only time they had to talk me into it. Everything else I was kind of up for. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, on you go.
I'm gonna have to go back and take a look at some of those. They were really entertaining, and I think it always reminds me of funny thing when years ago when I worked, I was doing a security awareness training, and it was sitting in one of the conference rooms, and we were just doing it the very FUD traditional way of scaring employees into doing things, and that doesn't work. It's just it irritates them, it gets friction, it makes them hate security. They see us as the evil. I find that I remember sitting in the conference room, and there was a noisy room next door of a bunch of kids all screaming and having fun, which is what you should be doing. And we're going, somebody go in and tell those frigging kids, be quiet. We're trying to do something serious here.
Yeah.
And somebody went in and they said, hey, those kids are here. Bring your kids to the work day. So the parents brought the kids in, and they couldn't sit next to their work, so they put them in a conference room, give them a bunch of games and like drawing stuff, and they were scribbling on the wall. And we decided, flipping hell, the executives, kids, not too much difference between the two of them. So we went in and was like, okay, hey, we're trying to solve this big problem. And they were like, oh, sure, tell us about it. And in the end, our security awareness training turned into a comic book, because the kid said the best way is to tell a story, something that relates. So you're absolutely, and that's exactly what you did, is you did that same storytelling, entertainment, and something that people will watch and will spend the time watching. And while they're being entertained, they're learning and taken away. And it also connects with everybody as well. Everyone will enjoy doing it. So I think what you did with those videos and having to go through some of those uncomfortable costumes really has made a lot of businesses much safer over that time.
It's weird, because the amount of traction I got on LinkedIn back then doing it was phenomenal, right? And I didn't really monetize it, right? Mm-hmm. It was more around me kind of acting out my childhood performance fantasies, really. And I could have done better at monetizing it. I made a bit of money, but it was kind of broke even, maybe. Mm-hmm. But what I found was, and why I didn't push more into it, is what I found was everybody loved it, right? Mm-hmm. It's almost like if you have a poll, and an anonymous poll, if I can say that word, anonymous poll of how many people watch porn, you're going to get the right result, right? Mm-hmm. If you do it in a room, put your hands up, who wants to watch porn? Nobody's going to stick their hand up for fear of everybody else looking around going, oh, you pervert. And that was the problem with my videos, were the fact that nobody wanted other people in a corporate setting to see them having fun watching them and learning watching them, which is sad, really, because it smacks of a cowardice a little bit, and it smacks of duplicity, because that's not how we live our lives. We live our lives in many, many different ways. And I get that the videos aren't for everybody. And I get some people may take offense, although we'll probably come to this at some point. It's the weirdest thing to do, to take offense. Oh, I'm offended. Oh, honestly, what? Anyway, we'll probably come to that at some point. But it's that duplicity of it that I found. The amount of people who came to me and said what you just said, thanks very much. I showed my nan that video, and for the first time ever, she sorted a password out and stuff like that, and it's all those types of things. And I get those messages quite a bit. I get like millions and millions of views on the videos, and then LinkedIn just changed the algorithm at some point, which is fine. Yeah. It's up to them. I'm not moaning about it, and the algorithm now is full of bullshit. The algorithm now is full of, hey, here's this, or somebody, people commenting on the news in terms of, hey, here's Rachel Reeves's budget, and here's what I think about it, and just for likes. And there was a guy who did it the other day about moaning about a mansion tax. So as my socialist upbringing led me to do, I jumped in and kind of sarcastically told him why tax was good. So and then you got people jumping. Yeah, I had one person jumping in. Imagine this, by the way. Imagine this on a platform, right? I had one person jumping in, blaming refugees and ethnicity. How how fucking stupid and bigoted and racist do you need to be to jump in with that type of shit? Sorry for swearing. I can't stop myself when people do this, you know? Refugees aren't the problem. The fucking billionaires are the problem. Go and sort the billionaires out, by the way. They're the problem. They're the ones who are keeping
They're the ones that can
fighting
afford
amongst each other.
how to find not to pay tax, because the
Yeah,
majority of them actually don't pay tax.
it's not even that, right? It's not even that. They're making us fight amongst each other. I like red. No, I like blue. No, I like red. No, I like blue. Instead of going, hang on, we might like purple, and those red and blue bellends up there are the ones that we should be focusing our anger on.
And
Viva la revolution, by the way. Once it happens, we'll be okay, brother.
And are the ones that's able to shift their businesses around enough in order to avoid taxes in different countries, so they can move it and hide it and relabel it to whatever. It's, you know, at the end of the day,
I will personally drive at my own cost every single millionaire who wants to leave this country to Dubai to the airport. I will pick them up in my car and drive them to the airport. They can go and get fucked.
Well, you heard it here. That's so. Tell me about when you switched to doing, as you mentioned, all of the things you've been doing before. And you took the training course about doing stand-up and making your presentations much more. So how do you find, what's from what you're doing in the security world, how much have you kept finding it crossing over into your comedy world as well? Are you starting to look at things a lot differently today when it comes to a lot of kind of day-to-day security? Because security's in the news almost every single day.
Yeah.
Are you finding that's becoming a lot of kind of your focus point, or are you moving into other areas?
No, I kind of stay traditionally in stand-up areas. If somebody's in the crowd is in cyber, or when I do crowd work, if they say I'm in cyber or whatever, or if somebody's a heckler, has been a pain in the ass, then I'll turn around and ask them, what's their porn name, for argument's sake. And I'll explain, for those who don't know, your porn name is your mother's maiden name and the name of your first pet. Mm-hmm. So I'll ask them what the porn name, and I'll tell them that my porn name is Muff Mooney, right? And that normally gets a laugh. They'll give me their porn name, then I'll explain to them that my day job is cybersecurity, and I know how to steal people's identities, and to do that, I only need 2 bits of information: your pet and your mother's name. So I'll do stuff like that and bring that in, Mm-hmm. Or I'll do the cyber joke about being, about online sexual relations and stuff like that. So I'll do bits and pieces like that. If I'm doing a cyber event, I'll throw a few more cyber jokes in, more around the companies, and companies' names and stuff like that. And explain to them about when we were at Symantec, we had a product called eFist, and it was generated in the States, and they had no idea of the connotation of what fisting meant. So we have to explain to them in the So I normally tell that story. That's a bit of a decent, funny story to tell. And then some of the stuff that we kind of used to get up to back in the day, and we're thankful that there was no camera phones about and stuff like that.
Absolutely. And what the 2 things we were fortunate enough when we were growing up was, one, there was no camera phones, and the second one is actually the laws were a little different as well.
Yeah.
The laws kind of didn't come into effect until like 96 and after. So some things before. One thing I also kind of want to kind of learn from as well, you mentioned a lot, from the social side of things. So what feedback do you tend to get from the audiences? What's kind of what's from a social side as well when you post the videos online? What's the interaction? What do you find? Because one thing is I know from speaking is I'm never going to please everyone in the audience.
Yeah.
So I mean, how do you deal with that, and what's the kind of way of kind of looking at things?
It's really difficult, Joe, because people will say, I don't care what other people think. And that's bullshit, right? That really isn't true, because I would say I've got quite thick skin. But, when somebody says something horrible about you online, my initial Liverpudlian upbringing wants me to go full violent mode on them, who do you think you're talking, and all that type of stuff. And I have to realize I'm 54 now, and I get out of breath getting out of my chair. So I have to temper that.
Putting our socks on in the morning is probably the most.
Yeah. Absolutely. I can barely fight sleep, to be quite honest. So, it does sting a little bit, but I got used to that on LinkedIn. right?
Mm-hmm.
I got used to it on LinkedIn. It still doesn't stop it stinging, but what it does do is it allows me to go, their opinion means nothing to me, even if they're being quite rude and stuff like that. Their opinion means nothing. So I've kind of rationalized it like that. But I had a post online on Instagram and it went viral. It's going viral. It's still going viral. So there's like 41 million views, right? There's over 186,000 likes. There's like 5,000 shares and stuff like that, and
That's
2,500
huge.
comments. Massive, massive, mate.
Where's your YouTube gold YouTube?
Yeah. It's honestly, it's massive, but it's the comments. It's the comments that are the best, right? Because nearly 200,000 people liking something that you've done is quite an accolade, right? There's 200,000 people are gone. If I could get them each to spend a tenner to come and see me, and then, I could fuck all of this nonsense off, to be quite honest. I'd be living on a desert island somewhere, So, but or even achieve my dream of paying for a start on the Liverpool bench. I'm sure I could do that.
I was going to say even by Liverpool.
Yeah, maybe. But so that's a thing in and of itself. But it's the comments that, and it's weird because it was a bit of crowd work. I was doing I was doing my hour-long comedy routine. I'd just finished Edinburgh. I'd come back home. A mate of mine in Cornwall said, "Would you come down and do your hour? You can do it." And, and it was a small cafe. It was sold out. There was 50 odd in there, which is lovely. It's nice, when things sell out, especially when they're coming to watch you. But the only place to have the stand or the stage or the microphone is right by the door. There's nowhere else to do it, right? I've played there 4 or 5 times. They've tried 4 or 5 different places. You can't do it anywhere else effectively other than where it is. So that means that you get interrupted with people coming in and going out. For me, that's great. So I'm not only a comedian, but I'm a crowd work comedian as well. So I'm quite quick with my comebacks and things like that. I think it's a Liverpool trait, right? It's not just Liverpool before anybody else jumps on the thing and goes, it's not just Liverpool. Yeah, I know it's everybody else. But we're kind of a little bit known for our quick and sarcastic comebacks, right?
Absolutely.
So this woman comes in and she storms in and she throws a rucksack at her husband and then storms back out again. Alters the mood. It alters the mood in the room instantly, like that. And when you're doing comedy, you have to control that mood of that room. You're setting the mood of the room, you're setting the tone, but you're controlling it as well. So when a heckler is heckling, that's why you've got to be good at putting the heckler down, because you're the person in control. And if you lose that control, it gets rowdy, gets away from you, all of that type of stuff. So I knew how to control the situation. So I made a couple of jokes, right? I made a couple of jokes about him and her and why that happened, and did she tell him what he was supposed to be doing this evening, or did he have to mind read it like every other woman? So I made a bit of an offhand, and it was off the cuff. It wasn't. And then I gave them some marital advice. I said, look, I've been through a divorce. I said, it's an expensive process. I said, I've run the numbers. I said, it's cheaper for either of you to hire a hitman off the dark web than it is to go through divorce, right? It's just, again, people very rarely go through amicable divorces. Newsflash, right? So I've done that. I've made a silly joke. So I've made 2 silly jokes, really. And then it just caught fire. It caught fire because of the comments. Because if you want to go viral, I've worked out how you go viral online. You upset a portion of North American women. That's how you go viral online, right? Who don't have a sense of humor. And they were just coming in and going, I have written a set about it, right? I've written a set about it, which I'm including in my new show. So called 1 Million to None, which is about me losing £1 million live on TV. So
yes, because you have been on Who Wants a Millionaire.
Yeah. It was a program called Red or Black here in the UK. And it was 50-50 chance to win £1 million, and it was a big roulette wheel. And I chose red and it came up black. Anyway, I build all that into the story. And I've written the first bit of that hour-long show is this kind of, but some of the comments are unhinged. By the way, it would take you all your time to reply to all of them. And in the beginning, I started replying to some of them, right? I started having a bit of fun with some of them. One of them said, misogyny is not a joke. And I wrote back, I said, you're right, it's not. It's a type of wood, isn't it? So, it's that type of thing that, and I can't help myself with that stuff, right? And and like you, coming back to what you said, I know I'm not for everybody. I don't want to be for everybody. I do not want to be vanilla. I want to be, I want people to turn, like Billy Connolly, right? My dad or my mum used to say, does he have to swear? Yeah, he fucking does. He's bringing us into reality. And they both swore like troopers, by the way. It's not that they never swore. They swore all the time. They just didn't want it on TV. It's like, what? Turn the TV channel over then, And it comes back to this being this faux anger, this faux offence, this being offended on other people's behalf. And then I get other women coming in, picking up on what they thought was me making a domestic violence gag. Domestic violence isn't funny. And I'm like, of course it isn't funny. I said, but this isn't domestic violence. This is a comedy night. I'm not giving you a TED talk. I'm really not. And if you're taking life advice from me, then you're a nut job. So it's all that type of stuff. And then, and then you get the other bit. When does the comedy start? And I'm halfway typing. I'm halfway typing through when I've finished with your mum before I then delete it and think I'm not putting that up there because actually, that's an old joke. I'm not going to do that. But it's as old as the joke that they've tried to do.
Yeah, I think
so. So
I was just I find over the years you've to that point. One of the things I've learned is that not to react too quickly, is to take that moment. And sometimes sometimes it's me. It's like, don't respond within 30 seconds. Count to 30.
Yeah.
And then by the time my mind is already reasoned about, well, okay, you're taking that pause, or sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm going to not do it immediately. I'm going to drive home from the office, and when I get home, my mind's had time. The same thing is, I get a lot of the comments from my speaking sessions and stuff, and some of them's great and some of them's negative, and you're just like, oh, okay. And I take that pause. If you're not at that point, is that you're taking that time in order to just kind of think about it. It doesn't really matter because it doesn't change anything to my life. Those comments.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. It's a great tactic. I used to use it on LinkedIn. I'd type something out, walk away, have a cuppa, come back, delete. Right? And you get your anger out then in terms of you having your right to reply without really going and sinking to their level, because it's a zero-sum game when, a lot of them are going to be bots now. A lot of them are just going to be, I normally have a quick, if somebody's been unduly harsh or unduly nasty to me, right,
Mm-hmm.
I'll normally go and have a look at their bio. More often than not, it's got some kind of dove in their bio and saying Jesus saves. So he obviously hasn't saved you, you horrible little prick, to be quite honest, So it's that type of stuff, or somebody having a go at me with quite questionable political views on their bio, and I'm like, this person's just out for an argument, so I'm not going to give them the argument.
You get a lot of trolls out there. There's lots of trolls that are just looking for reasons in order to gain their own visibility.
Yeah, I agree. I think if somebody was especially nasty, or just kept on, I'm not above finding out where they live and paying them a visit, by the way. That's just a little warning for them. I'm not above that.
Do you find that now you have to put some, one of the things is that sometimes when I'm speaking, it's like, I have to say, this is my opinion, or these are my thoughts, or I have to put some disclaimer. For example, I do a lot of hacking gamification, so I always say, don't use this for malicious purposes. Are you finding you have to put some type of disclaimer at the beginning or not?
I normally end all my comedy shows now. I normally end it with a disclaimer at the end of the comedy show. So I'll normally turn around and say, listen, I know comedy's subjective. I know that I may not be for everybody, and I shouldn't be for everybody. But you need to know that as a comedian, I do not set out to offend anybody. I do not set out to upset anybody. So if I have inadvertently offended anybody or upset anybody this evening, I want to tell you from the bottom of my heart that you need to grow the fuck up, is essentially how I end. So they think they're getting an apology, and I'm saying, grow a thicker skin, man. Life's better when you're laughing, by the way. You could be highbrow with this, and you could say, oh, that's not comedy, or this is comedy, or you need to do, that's not funny. That's fine. That's your opinion. That's okay. When people say that to me, I say to them, I'm still getting paid to do this, whether you like it or not, right? I may not be for you and you may not follow me. That's cool. But that's all right. There's no problem with that.
And people learn. That's how you learn, is from experiences. It's the same for me. I love stand-up, but not all comedians have the same type of comedy that I enjoy. I like the comedy which is about experiences and about sharing, the whole Billy Connolly, the storytelling aspect of it, the Jimmy Carr style, or, those types, it's a give and take. Some of it I like, some of it, it's like, okay, it's a little bit much, but
yeah.
But that's the experience, is that we grow to learn, is that what is your choice of preference? It's not that I might disagree with a person, but it doesn't mean I have to hate him.
No, I know. And don't get me wrong, I don't go, that'll upset people, I'll write that joke. I don't do that. Everything that I talk about comes from an experience. So even if it's an uncomfortable subject that people will go, oh, you can't joke about that, I'm like, I can, because I've got some form of experience of this, and that's why I'm joking. I would never joke about something I had no idea of, right? Something if it's almost like, I don't know, being a young new pop star and writing about divorce in your song. You've never been through it. How do you know? You haven't got a clue. Stop writing about shit you don't know.
Yeah. I mean, even I was in New York early this year, in New York, and I remember walking around. I remember it used to be easier to tell when people was listening to music or on the phone, because you used to have the cables coming down and you could see it connected to something. Now with the likes of AirPods and, in ear, it's like, and it's covered with a hair or with a hat, and they're just walking around talking in the air or waving their arms. I'm like, is that person? Is something else going on in their head?
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, even the environment we live in, it's changing and evolves quite a lot. I always love, you mentioned again Billy Connolly earlier. Another one came to mind about one of the things that when he was younger, his father and his mother. His mother said to the father's like, "You're not allowed to go out to the pub until all those kids are in bed." So it wasn't Billy Connolly's; it was the neighbors. Actually, it was the neighbors said, "You can't go to the pub until all those kids are in bed." And all of a sudden, I think Billy Connolly and his sister were out in the street running around playing it over. All of a sudden, the guy comes and just grabs the kids, any random 6 kids, brings them up into his house, puts them in the bed. They said the next thing they realized that all of a sudden, so he just picked any kids, put them in the house in bed rather than his own, so that he could go to the pub. And that's the childhood. That's the childhood type of experiences that I remember.
Yeah, it really is. He grew up in tenement blocks. My dad grew up in tenement blocks. I still remember the tenement blocks in Liverpool, where I have a very vague young memory of them, but I still remember them. And it was what I remember of it was a time of, even though it was utter poverty, it was a time of joy. It was a time of togetherness. It was a time of community. I think if we could all get back to that type of stuff, we'd be in a much better place.
Human interactions, really, like this, that's what I think is so important. A lot of kids are losing today. Even my kids, I've been taking them to a lot more comedy shows in recent times. We took them to Ismo, which is the Finnish comedian. He's hilarious. Ismo's so good. He's he's the slow pace of comedy. So it's like takes his time getting to the punchline, but he takes you on that really, really well. And then I'm trying to remember, there was another one earlier this year, which he was like a little bit more kind of say cursing in it. My son was just like, "Oh, is that okay?" And I'm like, "If you're telling a joke, why not?" So what's your favorite, comedian? What's if the comedian out there, what's the one that you kind of aspire to be or look at?
Billy, without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah, I always wanted to be able to tell the story like people would tell the story down the pub, and hold people captive in your hands telling that story. And I think if you're telling something that's backed in truth, you'll like I said earlier on, you'll embellish stuff, you'll make it, and I think also as well, the thing that Billy had that other great comedians have is they enact the story for you on stage as well. So if the drunken walks and all that type of stuff, and all of that was great. But yeah, if I could have I'll settle for 1% of his talent rather than 100 or 5 or 10. I'll settle for a percent. If I could have a percent of his talent, I'll do okay on the comedy scene.
Absolutely. I mean, it just reminds me, even not so long ago, my parents came to visit, and it was like comedy week for me, just
Yeah.
because their life is that.
Nice.
Is just the nonstop joking and making fun of everything. So it's always
Yeah. Life's better. Life's better when you do, you know? I mean, there's times to be serious, of course there is. There's times to be solemn. There's times to be sad. You know, you don't want to just be happy for happy's sake, because that's exhausting. That would be exhausting. But actually,
Absolutely.
when you find the fun in stuff, I mean, don't do it like a comedian, because it becomes like an addiction and an affliction where we can't go out now without my wife saying, right, do not be taking notes tonight. Do not be, that's like, and I'm making mental notes in that case, and I'm thinking, oh, that, for argument's sake, I saw something the other week. It was great. It was, actually, it was a couple of months ago, but if I say the other week, it brings it relevant, right? It was a couple of months ago. It was in the summertime, and it was in a service station in the UK, and it shows the frustration parents have with their children. And it was a young girl who was screaming that she wanted an ice cream. She got herself into that sobbing state, and you're still talking. You can't stop yourself, right? And the mum got so frustrated. And how much frustration do you need to say this to your child, right? The mum got so frustrated that she turned around and said, if you don't stop that now, if you don't stop that, there'll be no ice cream left in the world for anybody. You'll ruin it for everybody. And it's like, how frustrated you have to... But what a wonderful story and thing that's happened, because as a parent, we've been there, right? We've been in that situation as a parent. Or if you're not, if you're about to be a parent or thinking of being a parent, that's going to come up, right? That thing's going to come up.
One with your kid at the checkout line, and because they didn't get the candy, they just go into a massive tantrum right on the floor.
Yeah, it's that type of stuff that I love seeing, that I love. Yeah, I was walking along the beach the other day with my dog. I'm lucky enough to live by the coast in the UK. And I was walking along the beach, and there was a couple walking the other way, and we nodded, hello, how are you? And then she didn't see a stone on the floor, but she kicked, and then she went face first into the sand. How funny is that? That's great. It was just, because 6 months before I did exactly the same thing, but I did one of those elongated falls, where you fall in installments, you don't go down straight away.
Phases.
She went boom, and nosedives. It's brilliant. That's for me. That's what comedy is.
That's real life. Real life TikTok. That's real life TikTok reality. So, what things do you do to stay up? What's do you find entertaining to stay up to date? Is anything, documentaries, resources, books? How do you stay? Yeah. What's your learning method?
Audiobooks. I love audiobooks because I spend a lot of time in the car driving to and from gigs of an evening. I have a lot of time at my hands. I love history.
Any recent audiobooks that you've been listening to?
Yeah, loads. I mean, Unruly by David Webb. Great. It's about British history from William the Conqueror up to Elizabeth I, but it does a bit before as well to talk about Anglo-Saxons. And I love history. I love medieval times. I love all of that. Sapiens is always a favourite. I love anthropology. I love all of, that type of stuff. I was just finishing one called Scouse Republic, which is about Liverpool. Liverpool are known as Scousers. But it's the history of Liverpool from like 1200 when it became, when it got the royal seal of the town, village, hamlet, whatever it was, through to modern day, and the part it played in despicable events like the slave trade and that type of trade and triangle and all that type of stuff. But where the Scousers get the humour from, and the Beatles and all that type. So it really good from that point of view. And I love science books as well. Anything like by Brian Cox, he did a book on E = MC squared, why it is like that. He did a book on quantum theory. I mean, I'm a real different bundle of geeks, history geek, science geek. I love comedy, autobiographies. Jimmy Carr's autobiography is a wonderful autobiography. Kathy Burke, I've just finished listening to her autobiography. Wonderful comic actress and a great actress as well, not just the integrity that woman shows or comes over when you're listening to that audiobook. If everyone was like Kathy in this country, we'd have no problems whatsoever. She's just a lovely, warm,
add those to
being.
the show notes.
Yeah. I've got loads of them. And some of them I listen to them time and time again. I've listened to Scouse Republic 3 or 4 times, Unruly 3 or 4 times, you know. I've just finished Kathy. I'll get round to listening to it again because it's just wonderful.
Yeah, it's those things that bring you up and just entertain or at least kind of make you think about the world we live in sometimes, even from the science side of
Yeah.
things. So for the audience,
And Christopher Hitchens as well. I've got to call out Christopher Hitchens. He's a wonderful, wonderful author who goes out and not only a wonderful kind of intelligent person, you know, like an older Stephen Fry. Unfortunately, Christopher's no longer with us. You know, the arguments he makes for atheism and the debunking of certain myths he does, like the Mother Teresa myth and things like that, and and stuff like that. It's just a wonderful, wonderful alternative view to things. You know, he's never rude. But he's always spot on.
one of my more recent favorites that I just kind of enjoy is Taskmaster. With Greg Davis. Greg Davis is just and
I got to gig with Phil Ellis a couple of weeks ago.
Phil Ellis, because he was on the last season.
Yeah.
He was hilarious.
He
was so much fun.
You know what they say? Don't meet your heroes and stuff like that in terms of comedy. And I've met quite a few of them: John Bishop, Dara O'Brien, Sean Walsh, Flo and Joe, and they're all Emmanuel Sanubi. They're all to a person lovely individuals who will give you the time of day, who will help you in your because I have to keep pinching myself to where I am on the circuit at the moment. I'm only really 3 and a bit years in, and I'm already on pro gigs, on pro circuits, on pro nights.
That's
in
amazing.
big pro clubs. So and I know my keynoting has helped me there. I know that being on stage prior has helped me with that type of stuff, but also as well being a little bit older, understanding the usefulness of networking and how to not come across as being too overburdening in networking as well. That's all that peer relationship and life lessons that I think is sadly missing now.
Wonderful. So for the audience, what's the best way for them to see you?
Yeah.
Where can they go find out your, the next nights where, you're doing stand up? Do you have a regular place? Do you have a website they can go to and see, upcoming events? What's the best way to contact you?
So I'm just in the midst of kind of generating a website to do that. But you can keep up with all the events and new gigs and stuff like that on Instagram and TikTok. They're both the same handle. It's at Murph Standup. So it's at MURPH and then Standup, at Murph Standup. Or find me on Facebook, Ian Murphy. It's my own personal profile, but actually I just use it for comedy. So I don't really post I haven't posted any personal stuff on there for years, to be quite honest. So I just use that for comedy rather than set up a new comedy profile. So I've got like nearly 8,500 followers on Insta, 5,000 followers on TikTok, 9,500 followers on Facebook, 32,000 followers on LinkedIn. Any of those things you can, if you'll follow me on all of them, that's lovely. Bless you. Thank you. And I'll be playing a few comedy festivals next year around the UK, and then hopefully getting into maybe Europe and maybe further afield after that.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward. I mean, it's been a while since we've caught up, so I'm looking forward to getting over into being in the crowd with you.
Magic.
It's going to be such a fun time. So Ian, many thanks for being on. It's enlightening and just inspirational to what you're doing in the industry. In industry, one of my guests on recently said we're sometimes the bringer of bad news. A lot of times is that when you do see us, when we do speak, it's always to bring scary, the chaos world we live in, the threats, the attacks, the bad actors and the criminals out there. But at the same time, I do remember a lot of times where this was a fun industry, and you're kind of making that connection. You're bringing that and making it, that while we had to tell sometimes, harsh news, you make it in such a fun way. And such an inspirational as well.
I appreciate that. I think also as well, I think people are exhausted with fear, uncertainty and doubt, right? When you keep offering the sky is falling into people, it's like the boy who cried wolf. People are going to switch off, right? So you give them something different. It's kind of like my new role at the moment with Cybersecurity as head of growth. We're giving people something different. We're offering people an outcome of a certification. and actually the co-joined nature of the platforms they need to get that outcome. So we're securing businesses that have never been secured before or find it too trepidatious to go into it because they think it's expensive, it's complicated, it's this, it's that. But it's almost like, so I remember a story once about, maybe if you allow me to finish on this, I remember a story once around inoculations in sub-Saharan Africa, right? And they wanted to get people inoculated. I think it was against polio or stuff like that. But the inoculation, the pain of the inoculation or whatever it was too great. It put people off. So they wanted to offer a radio for people to, it was a wind-up radio, so it didn't need any electricity, no batteries. It was a wind-up radio. Come and have your inoculation, we'll give you a radio. And again, it was too much for them to think about the pain, to want to then go and get the prize at the end. So they changed it. They changed it really subtly. And they offered the radio. They were giving away free radios, and there was a queue around the block. And when they got there, the only stipulation to get this free radio was to have an inoculation. Well, we're here now. We've made the journey. We might as well get the inoculation. And that's exactly what we're doing with Cybersecurity. We're turning it around. We're turning around and saying, hey, here's the radio. The outcome, that's the outcome you want. You want certification. You want to be stronger. You want to be more secure. You want to be attractive to supply chain. You want to be attractive to other partners. You want to be attractive to customers. Here's how we do it. And we do it at very little or no cost to you as a customer because vendors and all that bear the cost. It's just a wonderful, and it's nice having conversations with people without having to talk about form, features, and function.
It's sometimes it's just making people realize a lot of what you've already been doing. It's just, sometimes it can be, put together in a different way to help you achieve the outcomes that you're saying. So absolutely. It's been fantastic having you on. I always enjoy, we should catch up a lot more sooner than what it has been recently. So for the audience, this is the Security by Default podcast, bringing you entertainment, fun, making the world not just a safer place, but a much more fun place to live in. So everyone take care, subscribe, share, and I will see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you and stay safe. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of the Security by Default podcast. I'm Joseph Carson, and again, many thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe and share, and please stay safe. And until the next time, we'll see you soon.